Welcome, fellow knowledge seekers, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on, well, a really fascinating journey. We're looking into the life and works of a writer whose stories, they captivated millions.
Absolutely. Yet, his critical reputation, it's seen these dramatic ups and downs.
Wow.
It's quite the paradox, isn't it?
It really is. Immense popularity, but sometimes academic dismissal almost running alongside it.
It's a compelling puzzle. How did Maugham get that huge appeal? Well, some critics just couldn't quite place him. He draws you in. The prose is so clear.
Deceptively simple, maybe?
Exactly. And then, bam, he subtly challenges how you see people, human nature. It's quite profound, actually.
And that's really what this deep dive is all about today. We're looking at William Somerset Maugham, the English writer, known for, well, everything. Short stories, plays, even those really influential spy novels.
Yeah, and to get the full picture, we've pulled together insights from expert takes, detailed summaries, biographical stuff, even his Wikipedia entry, actually, giving it a good look.
So, our mission today is to unpack not just his big works and their themes, but also that compelling, often kind of contradictory personal life. Because that clearly shaped his view of humanity, right? That unflinching portrayal.
Absolutely. We want to figure out why he's seen as this master storyteller whose relevance just endures, despite, or maybe even because of, all those debates about his literary standing.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Maugham's beginnings were pretty unlikely, weren't they? Born in Paris, 1874, sounds glamorous.
It does, but the location, the British Embassy, that's the interesting bit.
Right, what was that all about? It wasn't just chance, was it?
No, not at all. It was actually a clever legal move. France was looking at a law or thinking about one.
Something about citizenship for foreign-born kids and military service.
Exactly, making them French citizens liable for the draft. So to get around that, the embassy basically set up a temporary maternity ward.
Just like that, on embassy grounds.
Yep. Made sure he was technically born on UK territory, almost strategic, you could say. Feels kind of fitting for him somehow.
It really does. But that Parisian start, it didn't last. Tragedy struck pretty early.
Terribly early. Orphaned by age 10, both parents gone, he was sent off to England to live with a paternal uncle in Whitstable, Kent.
And this uncle was not exactly warm and fuzzy, I gather.
Apparently quite cold, yeah. Imagine the contract, loving Parisian home, French is your first language, then suddenly you're in Kent with a reserved uncle struggling with English.
That must have been incredibly isolating.
Profoundly so. So the stammer started, the shyness. He felt like an outsider, got teased at school for his poor English. That feeling, it seems, never really left him.
You can see how that outsider perspective would become so central to his writing later on.
Definitely. Always observing. But despite those struggles, he clearly had a sharp intellect. At 16, he was off to Heidelberg University for, a year and a half?
Studying literature, philosophy, German. And it was there he had his first significant relationship.
Yes, his first sexual affair with an older Englishman, John Ellingham Brooks.
How important was that, do you think, personally and maybe for his writing?
Oh, hugely pivotal. Brooks encouraged his writing, absolutely. But he also introduced him to thinkers like Spinoza.
Spinoza? Of human bondage? Is that where the title comes from?
That's the link. Spinoza's Ethics has books with those titles of human bondage, of human freedom. It shows how those early encounters, personal and intellectual, fed directly into his later work. It's quite remarkable.
So after Heidelberg, this intellectual exploration, he then turns to medicine. Seems like a sharp turn.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He studied at St. Thomas's Hospital in London, pretty reluctantly, from 1892 to 1897. 5 years.
But did he ever actually, practice as a doctor?
Nope, not really. He qualified in 1897, got the credentials, and then immediately dropped it to become a full-time writer. He said he took to it as a duck takes to water.
So the medicine was more like research.
That's a great way to put it. It gave him, in his words, exposure to life in the raw. Seeing how people face death, pain, hope, fear, all that intense human emotion firsthand, invaluable material for a writer.
And you see that raw material almost immediately in his first novel, Liza of Lambeth, right, 1897.
Straight away. It drew directly on his experiences in the South London slums during his medical training. A story of working-class adultery.
And it caused a bit of a stir.
Oh yeah, sold out in 3 weeks. Reviews were mixed. Some praised the vividness, others found it singularly unpleasant, but even they admitted his skill.
But it wasn't novels that made him famous initially, was it? It was the stage.
Correct. He became a sensation as a playwright. By 1908, get this, he had 4 plays running at the same time in London's West End.
4 simultaneously.
Unprecedented. Lady Frederick ran for over 400 performances. Punch magazine even did a cartoon of Shakespeare's ghost looking worried about Maugham taking over.
Huh, that's amazing. He wrote, what, over 30 plays in total?
32, yeah. He was a dominant force, but then around 1933, he just stopped.
Yeah.
Abandoned the theater.
Why, when he was so successful?
He wanted complete independence. Theater's collaborative, right? Actors, directors, producers, limitations. Prose novels, short stories gave him total control. Just him and the page. Fits his character, maybe.
That drive for independence, and that independence let him pursue other things too, like his wartime experiences.
Right. World War I, he started as a volunteer ambulance driver in France. Basic stuff.
Then it got a bit more. Cloak and dagger.
A lot more. He ended up working for the British Secret Service. MI6, essentially.
Seriously, Somerset Maugham, the famous writer, was a spy.
Yep. Stationed in Geneva, the South Seas, even Russia during the Revolution. His languages, French, German, and his cover as a writer made him perfect for it. Coordinating agents, gathering intel.
So he wasn't just writing spy stories, he was living them.
Pretty much. And that experience led directly to his 1928 collection, Ashendon, or The British Agent. Hugely influential book for the whole spy genre.
How did his take on spying differ from, say, James Bond later on?
Oh, completely different feel. Maugham's agent, Ashendon, he's pragmatic, morally ambiguous. It's not glamorous. It's messy, cynical, deals with the unheroic side of espionage.
Or more realistic, maybe.
So realistic, apparently, that the stories couldn't be published for 10 years after the war ended. Too close to the bone. Shows how authentic his portrayal was.
Incredible. Just drawing everything from life. Okay, let's dig into some of those major works then. Of Human Bondage, 1915. Often called his masterpiece.
It really is. And heavily semi-autobiographical. You follow Philip Carey, orphaned as a clubfoot, searching for meaning, trying different paths, ministry, art, medicine again.
But the core of it is that relationship, isn't it, with Mildred Rogers?
Oh, Mildred. It's one of the most, frankly, harrowing depictions of obsessive love you'll find. She's described as rude and materialistic, a waitress.
And Philip just can't let go.
He can't. She uses him, dumps him repeatedly, falls into poverty, sex work, even destroys his things out of spite.
Yeah.
It's this brutal look at emotional dependency, that bondage of the title.
Yeah.
Just soul-crushing.
Wow. How did people react to something that intense back then?
Initially, reviews were a bit lukewarm, but then the American novelist Theodore Dreiser really championed it, called it a work of genius.
And that changed things.
It helped turn the tide, yeah. Cemented Maugham's reputation as a serious novelist, tackling these big universal themes. Growing up, class, loneliness, finding purpose, all that heavy stuff.
Okay, then moving on a few years, The Moon and Sixpence, 1919. This was inspired by Gauguin, the painter.
That's the inspiration, yes. It follows Charles Strickland, a stockbroker who just walks out on his family, goes to Paris, then Tahiti, all to become a painter, abandons everything for art.
And the big question Maugham poses here is...
It's a killer question. Does genius justify cruelty? Strickland creates incredible art, but he causes immense pain. Maugham really makes you wrestle with that can great art excuse terrible behavior. Very provocative.
He doesn't shy away from uncomfortable ideas. What about The Razor's Edge later on, 1944? That seems different again.
It is. It's set after World War I, dealing with that sense of disillusionment. It critiques Western materialism and follows a character searching for spiritual enlightenment.
And again, drawing from Monk's own life. I heard he visited India.
He did. He met the Hindu sage, Ramana Maharishi, who became a model for the guru figure in the book.
Yeah.
So it's exploring that pull between, the material world and the spiritual path. What really gives life meaning after trauma. Still very relevant, I think.
Definitely. And we shouldn't forget his short stories. He wrote tons of them, right? Often set on, colonial outposts.
Prolific short story writer. Malaya, the South Pacific. Those settings allowed him to really expose hypocrisy, cultural clashes, the tensions of empire.
Is there one story that really stands out as classic Maugham?
Rain is probably the most famous. About a British missionary who becomes obsessed with reforming and then desiring a prostitute, Sadie Thompson, on a remote island.
I think I know that one. Or adaptations of it.
It's a masterclass in moral ambiguity. Nobody's purely good or evil. The lines just blur completely. That's pure Maugham, that unsentimental look at human failings.
So, if we try to pull it all together, what makes Maugham such a powerful, enduring storyteller? What are his core strengths?
Well, several things stand out. First, that psychological depth. He dissects motives, but sort of clinically, without judging. Just shows you how people tick.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the prose itself. It's so clear, so accessible. Not dense like some modernists, but it's layered, There's more going on beneath the surface.
Easy to read, but makes you think.
Exactly. And his travels. That global perspective really enriched his work, gave it scope. And finally, that realism we mentioned. He doesn't romanticize love or ambition or failure. It feels true, often uncomfortably so.
But he wasn't universally loved by critics, despite the popular success. What were the main criticisms leveled against him?
Yeah, he definitely had his detractors. Some found his style too cold, too detached, lacking warmth maybe.
Yeah, I can see that.
More recently, people have questioned the colonial lens in some of his stories set abroad, which is a fair point to discuss.
Sure.
But the big one, ironically, was that his popularity almost worked against him in academic circles. He got labeled middlebrow.
Ouch. Meaning?
Meaning popular, accessible, but maybe not intellectually deep or innovative enough for the highbrow critics. There was even a snarky comment that his clarity came at the cost of numberless cliches.
That seems a bit harsh, given the depth we've been talking about.
It does. It's that old tension. Can something be hugely popular and great art? Academia sometimes struggles with that.
How did Maugham himself feel about all this? Did the criticism bother him?
He seemed remarkably, pragmatic about it. He actually said he had no illusions about his literary position. Felt few critics took him seriously, but he didn't resent it. Said it was very natural.
Wow, that kind of detached self-awareness there, too.
Exactly. Almost like he knew his worth, regardless of the critical debates.
And that detachment, or perhaps complexity, seems mirrored in his personal life, too. He comes across as quite enigmatic.
Deeply complex. Described as stoic yet vulnerable. That stammer again, and a cynical idealist. And crucially, he was primarily homosexual in an era when that was incredibly difficult and dangerous.
Right. Which makes his marriage seem complicated.
Very. He married Siri Welcome. They had a daughter, Liza. But by most accounts, it was a marriage entered into partly out of a sense of duty or maybe for cover. It ended in divorce affairs on both sides, general incompatibility.
That struggle for authenticity must have informed his writing, too, seeing hypocrisy everywhere.
You have to think so. And his significant relationships were outside the marriage. Gerald Haxton, his long-term companion.
What was Haxton's role? He sounds like quite a character.
Apparently very extroverted, the opposite of the shy Maugham. He acted as Maugham's sort of social intermediary, his connection to the outside world.
And didn't Haxton get banned from Britain?
He did, yeah. Some kind of scandal. Which is one reason Maugham spent so much time living abroad on the French Riviera, traveling. Haxton could be with him there. Fueled the writing too, of course.
So his life and work were constantly feeding each other.
Absolutely intertwined. After Haxton died, Alan Searle became his secretary and companion later in life. Biographers seem a bit divided on Searle's influence.
And in later years, Maugham was quite the grand figure, wasn't he? Entertaining lavishly.
Oh yeah, at the Villa La Mauresque in Cap Ferrat. Became a very famous, very wealthy author. He also established the Somerset Maugham Award for Young Writers, which is a great legacy. Supported people like John le Carre, V.S. Naipaul early on.
That's fantastic. So, bringing it all back, why do you think Maugham's stories still hit home today? Why do people keep reading him?
Because, fundamentally, he wrote about timeless human struggles, didn't he? Love is this agonizing force, the price you pay for freedom, that constant battle between wanting things and wanting meaning.
Materialism versus spirituality.
Exactly. And his characters, they aren't heroes. They're flawed, they make mistakes, they're relatable, they feel real. Unforgettable, often.
So it's not escapism he offers?
Not at all. As you said earlier, he offers truth. A sometimes difficult truth. Life is messy, choices aren't easy, redemption isn't guaranteed. He reminds you of that.
Which loops back perfectly to where we started, that paradox. Critics debated his literary position, but Maugham himself was quite blunt. I have no illusions about my literary position. I do not resent it. It is very natural.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It leaves you pondering.
Yeah.
In a world that loves neat labels and academic approval, what actually makes a writer's legacy last? Can huge popular appeal sometimes hide real depth?
Maybe that brutal honesty he had about human nature feels so refreshing precisely because it doesn't fit into easy boxes.
Perhaps. Maybe the best way to decide is to pick up one of his books yourself and see how it resonates with you. Something to think about.